Good morning. I'm here to greet the vinyl community. I got my Charlie Manson t-shirt on. There's Nic Schreck's book. Buried in the back pages. August 9th, 1970, the first anniversary of Tex Watson's rampage. Watson, the killer responsible for the crimes, was conveniently nowhere to be seen in Los Angeles Superior Court 1 year after his deadly deeds. His relatives and small-town sexes succeeded in preventing his extradition to California for months. His lawyers argued, probably correctly, that his client can't get a fair trial in Los Angeles. Watson's absence allowed Bugliosi to get away with focusing his complete case on Manson. And 1 year and to the day after the crimes, Charlie made one more of his more memorable court appearances. As was widely reported in the national press, Charlie held up the front page of the Los Angeles Times with its screaming headline, "Manson Guilty, Nixon Declares." By showing that blatant miscarriage of justice to the jury, charging that deciding his fate, Charlie hoped that he'd be granted a mistrial. But this was not just any other case. Special conditions prevailed. As we might expect in the farcical proceedings, the judge ruled that the jury was somehow not at all prejudiced by seeing the President of the United States must publicize and, as it turns out, very deliberately stated premature judgment. According to Charlie's karma, caught up with Nixon when he was forced to resign his office in disgrace on August 9, 1974, exactly 4 years later. With such disgracing melodrama involving high-profile crime headlines going on in Bugliosi's Big Top, we must presume that the only especially thorough readers of the Van Nuys Valley News would have taken notice as a far more obscure local crime article published that day, as only a small criminal circle directly involved would have known. The article actually had more to do with the larger picture of the Tex Watson murder spree than the great deal of what was going on in the De La Bianca proceedings. Between the report of the heavy beauty contest crowning and the generous 69-cent value coupon for Valley Car Wash as an anonymous Van Nuys Valley News reporter, a piece entitled "Retrial Set in Gangland Death Case" updated the largest legal machinations in the court proceedings of a less than upstanding citizen named Eugene D. Glissaro. Gino was his partner in crime. A 30-year-old ex-con, all-around crook, pimp, burglar, and drug dealer under surveillance by the FBI, Massaro was an associate of the notorious jewel thief Murph the Surf. On the night of May 8, 1968, he posed a gun-wielding police officer with two other armed associates, so disguised he and his fellow felons forcefully gained entrance to the Van Nuys apartment, harboring three rival drug-dealing thugs. These three young men were Brian Jones, no, not despite the drugs, not the soon-to-be-dead Rolling Stones, and the Flats residents, Ivars Apintas and Peter Eden. The reason for Massaro and his company's rude visit in January of 68, Jones and Apintas borrowed $11,000 from Eden in order to purchase a large sum of marijuana for sale. This then precisely sum was promptly bought by Jones to another shady character, Bruce Orlansky, henchman of another young dealer, Martin Hodgman. Orlansky burned Jones and Apintas, brandishing a gun and stealing the 11 grand from Jones without providing the promised weed in exchange. Jones, Apintas, and Eden were not happy about this ripoff, but such double dealing was an occupational hazard in the high stakes of drug racket. The angry gangster tried to get their dough back from Hodgman. For being cooperative, Hodgman paid Massaro and his two companions $2,000 to rough up the dealers they'd ripped off as a warning to lay off if they knew what was good for them. Upon gaining entry to the mission in mind, Massaro demanded the stuff. Said stuff being a mountain of cocaine that was three phony officers believed to have just been delivered to the site. Massaro's risk was enhanced when the intruders commenced to pistol whip their competitors. Apintas, one of the trio of underworld operators surprised by the raid, was also armed. To defending himself from the pistol whipping, Apintas fired a gun, killed during his fusillade with George Bart Piscitelli, one of Massaro's fellow faux cops, a former henchman of infamous Los Angeles gangster Mickey Cohen. Piscitelli had been enmeshed in more than one level hit in his long criminal career. Gino Massaro suffered gunshot wounds to his stomach and arm, so serious that he collapsed on the street after staggering downstairs, leaving a trail of blood behind him. He was apprehended by police and brought to a cop hospital. His condition was judged to be grave, so that a Catholic priest was summoned to administer last rites. By the grave of the gangland gods, Massaro survived to be placed on trial for his part in the mayhem, and very probably to murder a criminal associate of who would be entangled in the Cielo Drive caper 1 year later. On August 9, 1970, when so little in the way of factual information was really known about the series of ripoffs and murders Tex Watson committed, this everyday gang warfare from 2 years earlier, unnoticed by the general public, must have seemed pretty hum-ho. Compared to the larger-than-life spooky spectacle the media and the DA had spun around the Manson case, Gino Massaro raid on Ivar's Apintas to settle a score for some other hood was underworld business as usual. But the better informed reader of today, aware of some of the complexities of the Watson murders, we also already noticed that Massaro and company's home invasion with a drug dealing burn is not significantly different than the kind of crimes Tex Watson had committed when he ripped off Bernard Latza Crow or sought to avenge himself at Cielo Drive when it was in turn burned by Wachowski. Let's read that again. Gino Massaro suffered gunshot wounds to his stomach and arm so serious that he collapsed in the street after staggering downstairs, leaving a trail of blood behind him. He was apprehended by police and brought to a hospital. His condition was judged to be grave, so that the Catholic priest was summoned to administer last rites. By the grave of the gangland gods, Massaro survived to be placed on trial for his part in the mayhem, and very probably to murder a criminal associate of who he would be entangled in the Cielo Drive caper 1 year later. On August 9, 1970, when so little in the way of factual information was really known about the series of ripoffs and murders of Tex Watson committed, this everyday gang warfare from 2 years earlier, unnoticed by the general public, must have seemed pretty hum-ho. Compared to the larger-than-life spooky spectacle the media and the DA had spun around the Manson case, Gino Massaro's raid on Ivar Apintas to settle the score of some other hood was underworld business as usual. But better informed readers of today, aware of some of the complexities of the Watson murders, will have already noticed that Massaro and company's home invasion was about a drug deal burn is not significantly different than the kind of crimes Charles Watson had committed when he ripped off Bernard Latza Crow, or sought to avenge himself at Cielo Drive when he in turn burned by Wachowski. I don't think we'll ever know who burned who. There's no rules of engagement, but I'm going to keep reading. Massaro's brutal beating of rival dealers bears comparison to the savage treatment Fikowski meted out to Billy Doyle, another unreliable drug dealer, and the beating of Tex Watson gave to Jay Sebring. So Tex is beating up Jay Sebring? In fact, we took a look more closely at the other parties in crime associated with the obscure Massaro and Apintas. So I got a light coming in my room, sorry. Manson's brutal beating of rival dealers, bearing comparison to the savage treatment Fikowski met out on Billy Doyle, another unreliable drug dealer, and the beating of Tex Watson gave Jay Sebring. In fact, when we take a closer look at the other partners in crime associated with the obscure Massaro and Apintas, we find direct links to Cielo Drive and Tex Watson that makes it clear these similarities in modus operandi are more than coincidence. As we will be classified in more detail, Gino Massaro was the partner in crime and probable executioner of Joel Rostow. one of the deadly dealers who later delivered drugs to J. Sebring on August 8th, 1969. Was that why Joe was unalived? Masaro's partner, Rostow, was the lover of J. Sebring's salon receptionist, Charlene McCaffrey. In April of 69, Charles Watson was an unknown companion who would break into Rostow's home at gunpoint to steal drugs in the manner quite similar to Masaro's attack on Ivar Pintas and his fellow felons 1 year earlier. If we understood Sebring's tangled and confusing interactions with Rostow, Massaro, and Watson, all of whom we feared neighbors at one point, I believe it would emerge that two infamous crimes at Cielo and Waverly simply got more publicity than the wave of similar drug-related conflicts that began at least as early as 1968 and may have extended to San Francisco and Sausalito in 1967. So next time, hopefully you can see a little better. I'll try to fix the light. There's something called fixed games and vested interests. These involve a whole lot of more drug dealers, including the mafia and all their rackets, and some of the people from Cielo Drive, Witowski and Fratowski, and all these guys involved in it. A quote from Jesus, the Gospel of Thomas. For there is nothing hidden that will be not revealed, and there is nothing covered up that will not be uncovered. Next time it's going to be about Frankie Carbo, and so on and so forth. That's enough for today. The Manson trial is alive and well. Yes, it is. We pray for these families, and we pray for justice in our country.